We'll bring you that later subsequently. Now, in a shocking revelation, convicted murderer Janusz Walus has stated that he feels no remorse for killing South African Communist Party leader Chris Hani. Walus was imprisoned for 30 years following his assassination of Chris Hani. Hani was shot outside his home in Don Park, Boksburg, on the 10th April 1993. His assassination had a profound impact on South African politics landscape and was a pivotal moment during the transition from apartheid to democracy. In an exclusive interview aired on Sunday by ENCA, Walus expressed controversial views, claiming that he believes black people are not equipped to rule the country. He further asserted that he considers white people to be a superior race. To unpack this, we are joined by a member of National Assembly and member at Portfolio Committee on Defense and War Veterans, Carl Niehaus. Carl, you're welcome. Thank you very much for joining us this evening here in Nigeria.
Good evening, and thank you for having me.
Yes. So, Carl, can you describe your first reaction upon watching Janusz Walus' interview and what emotions or thoughts it provoked or evoked in you?
Well, it was absolute disgust and shock. I knew Comrade Chris Hani very well. We were close comrades, and I know how terrible the consequences were of the assassination of Comrade Chris for our nation. I know that we have probably been robbed by that killing of someone who could have become the president of South Africa and who was certainly the most popular member of the African National Congress at that stage. It had huge consequences for the direction in which the ANC went after Comrade Chris's assassination. It led to decisions by the ANC that up to this day are impacting on the people of South Africa and has not given us the full liberation that we've hoped for, and especially the full economic liberation that Comrade Chris Hani stood for during his life and which he articulated like no other until his death. So this disgusting racist, Janusz Walus, killed one of the most important persons who could have determined a great future for the majority of South Africans. He sat for this horrendous crime that he committed 30 years in prison, and yet it seemed to have had absolutely no impact on the man. It did not change his views. It did not make him understand how wrong he was, how terribly wrong he was in what he had done. I listened to that interview hearing a racist which is unrehabilitatable. 30 years of prison has made no change to him. Imagine saying that African and black people are less competent than white people. Imagine saying that he doesn't believe that black people, African people in South Africa should have the vote, that they should only have been given the vote in little allocated homelands. And the worst part of that interview was to see that he's got absolutely no regret for what he had done. In fact, he said if called on him to do so, he will do so again. So we have to ask ourselves, on that basis, how was it possible for Janusz Walus to have been released from prison? He was given a life sentence. And the parole system in South Africa determines that a prisoner who is given parole must show remorse, and that prisoner must also show that that person had been rehabilitated because of the impact of the sentence on his life. None of that has happened. Mm-hmm. So I'm deeply disgusted also with the South African government and with the judicial system in South Africa that we have allowed Janusz Walus to be released from prison. He should have stayed in prison until his very last day. And that was what the widow of Comrade Chris Hani requested. But her quite correct and deeply felt request was disregarded by the South African government
Now, Carl,
disregarded by the judiciary.
Carl, regarding his lack of remorse, do you think that this points to a deeper issue, perhaps maybe a lack of accountability or maybe a lack of consequences, effect of consequences, rather?
Yes, the consequences for Janusz Walus should have been that he should have stayed in prison for the rest of his life. And I would have expected, if he showed any small sign of contrition, that he should have spoken about the whole background of how Chris Hani was killed, who was involved, because Walus never came clean. He never spoke about the whole situation that unfolded around the killing of Chris Hani. We still today don't know who the other persons or powers in South Africa are that have been involved in that assassination, because it is evident to us that there was much more to play in this assassination of Comrade Chris Hani than simply Janusz Walus as a single person with the assistance of Clive Derby-Lewis, who apparently gave him the gun when to kill Chris Hani. Now, we must ask the question whether there are members of the South African government who are scared if Walus was ever going to tell the full true story. Are there members of the African National Congress who didn't want to see the radical and economically sound views of Chris Hani to prevail within the ANC, who had been involved in this assassination? And did they move Walus as quickly and as soon as they could out of the country in order to silence him and to make sure that that knowledge never becomes available and that they will never be brought to account? These are the harsh realities that we face with regards to this totally unacceptable release on parole of Chris Hani, of Janusz Walus.
All right, then, Carl, I want to say thank you very much and for sharing your views on the issue. Thank you indeed, Carl.
Thank you.
Have a great rest of the evening.